Absolutely.
All right. So with that, we'll turn it over to Mike. Since we have such a small group here, please, Aaron, Mike, if you have any questions, you want to know more about the project or anything else that the Water District does, or the water that we move around, or even some of the watershed work that we do, please feel free to interrupt and go from there. And even if you didn't have time or you think of something else, please, Tony is available, apparently even from other countries, if you have questions or you need anything else answered.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, like Aaron said, I've been working on this project since 2012, and we started planning even before that, but the design was completed in 2015 and we started construction then. So I have about 28 slides I put together for tonight's presentation, and I'm kicking it up a notch, as Emerald would say, to be a little bit more technical than in the past, because some of you guys have been coming regularly, and I don't want to bore you with stuff you've already seen. So we have a few new parts to the presentation tonight. But we're going to go through the same thing we always do, is go over the background about the project, where we are today on the project, what's coming up, and then how to stay informed on the project. So as Aaron mentioned, the plant serves the west side of the county. We think sometimes of geographically from Highway 17 to Palo Alto is pretty much served by this treatment plant. And Aaron just mentioned our raw water sources, but the plant was built in 1968. There's a really cool picture on the wall out there that shows the construction back in '68, and you can see there was no development at all around the site at that time. And when the plant was built, it used the most current technology available, but now 50 years later there's better ways to treat water, and that's what we're building here right now. Aaron also mentioned that today we met our 80 million gallon peak capacity for the plant. We can actually, it's kind of like your car, when you get above 80, things start to rattle, but you can still go a little bit faster. The plant can go a little bit above 80, but things start to rattle. So that's one of the objectives of the project, is to increase the capacity of the plant to give that margin of safety that we don't have now. If this really heat spell that we're in right now lasts for weeks at a time, the plant would be sorely stressed to keep up with the demand. So with the increased capacity that we'll have at the plant, we'll be able to meet that demand. Even though the increased capacity is not intended to serve a larger population, it's intended to make the existing plant more reliable. One of the things that's always been a concern since our first public meeting. Oh, please.
When you say increased capacity, are you talking about 5%? Are we talking about 10%?
From 80 to 100.
Oh, okay.
So that's 25%. Yes, another question.
So back in '68, it was sized for, I presume, a projection of what the population would be in this area. And so it seems like, my guess is that the population projection has been overshot, and is 25% increase going to be enough?
You want to take that one?
I'll let you start the first part, and then I'd like to do it in follow-up.
Okay. Well, the projections that led to sizing it at 80 MGD are just as you described. When we went into planning for this project, we did look at all the information that's available through the county general plan and the potential for increased population that might be served by the plant. And the finding was that there is not a large population increase planned for this area. So those kind of projections are based on statistics and seat of the pants guesses sometimes. So we're right now what we're looking at is the 100 MGD is intended mostly for reliability and with a small margin that could be available for increased population. I think Aaron maybe knows more about this than I do.
And I'd just like to maybe chime in a little bit further. So Mike is correct with what he was talking about earlier on the 80 MGD and some of the population growth up to 100 MGD. But one of the things that the district does have to look at is our water supply master plan and actually the urban water management plan. So we do work closely with the land use agencies, with the retailers to kind of understand and project. And you'll notice that recently the district actually has in our urban water management plan and our water supply master plan, we have like a package of no regrets where we're basically looking to understand what those needs are into the future. That includes things like conservation, we're also looking at not only on the treated water side, but we're confident that we have enough capacity for what we're working on here, but how do we get the source water here also? So there's many things out there such as California Water Fix, the New Pacheco Reservoir, purified water. Where do those things all kind of fit in? So this is one of the tools that the district uses to manage water in the valley. And we think it is sized appropriately, but that's because it's used in conjunction with the other tools that we have. And also are concerned in making sure that we get enough raw water into the system, understanding what we've got going on, and even with maybe the changing environment and climate change. So if you'd like any more information we've got a plethora on our website for the Water Supply Master Plan, and you're welcome to comment or learn more about it or talk to me about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Can I put 2 cents in?
Oh, yes,
Can I just kind of build upon it? So back when this plant was originally designed, this was the only water plant, drinking water plant in the valley.
Wow.
Right, so that's the very first one, in 1968. And so it was providing drinking water to offset taking groundwater from the ground, because back in there was some actually ground subsidence from taking too much water out of the ground. And so from there, they built this plant. As well, once they found this plant was not enough to feed the entire area, then they built 2 other treatment plants on the east side. Santa Teresa, actually Penitentiary was first at 40 million gallon capacity, and then Santa Teresa at 100 million gallon capacity. So now that now makes up the entire treated water system in the valley. So I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
Then maybe I'll add a comment to that. This is
We got to earn our money somehow.
And you probably already know that some of the source water that's coming to these 3 treatment plants in the county primarily is surface water, and then particularly imported water from outside the county, and then we import water from state water project and federal water project. And there's lots of challenges, I guess, with these imported water sources. There's environmental challenges, there's endangered species challenges, there's global warming, climate change. These are all issues that state and federal governments are dealing with, resulting that all of us getting water from these sources are dealing with these issues also. So in planning as a water supply agency for this county, in planning for the future, Aaron mentioned earlier that we're in the process of developing what we call water supply master plan for 2040. We're planning for 2040. This plan is where you consider a portfolio of many things, and imported water is only one source of our entire portfolio of water supply. Of course, our goal is always to provide safe and clean water for everybody in Santa Clara County, no matter how many people in Santa Clara County. The development within Santa Clara County is really all of water supplies, water districts control, where we're more of a service organization. We're not a land use regulatory agency. Those are city and county jurisdiction. So there's also that challenge within the county. So moving forward, I believe water conservation should become more and more prominent within the overall portfolio of the water supply, and making water to me, that's the way that, so that even if there is water coming from somewhere, is we need to build huge infrastructure to bring the water into Santa Clara County, store it somewhere, and then distribute and then treat it. Probably the fourth treatment plant. Maybe, yeah. You have to treat it. Once you treat it, and then it's distributed to different places that's needing it. So it's not as simple that there's water, but then the transportation of water, the treatment of the water, the storage of the water is all part of the investment that is made for the future of the county. So all these issues are intertwined. So coming back to my message that water conservation is probably the cheapest way of getting considered that it's a water source.
Okay. I thought something too, but we talk long enough. One of the things that we sometimes don't realize is that the Water District was one of the leading and early adopters of conjunctive use here in California, and one of the forerunners. Not many large urban water districts had the foresight to look at the ability to put water in the groundwater and save it and pump it out later. And right now, you notice a lot of the water district facilities their objective, their purpose is to put surface water that we collect in Lexington and other reservoirs into the groundwater, and then San Jose Water Company pumps it out. They actually pay a pump tax to us for the work that we do to put the water in the groundwater. So there's lots of layers, and it's very complex, but it's working fairly well so far. Anyway, we'll go back to some of the impacts to you as neighbors from our project. And one of the early impacts that we realized was a problem was traffic. We have a haul route. That's one of the things that we always emphasize, is that the trucks that you see that are working on this project are limited to certain routes. We don't want our trucks on Wedgwood. They're supposed to only be on Moore Avenue up from Pollard, and they only can use Lark Avenue and Camden to get off of 17. So we've had a few violations of that haul route, and we assess what we call liquidated damages when the contractor is off the haul route. We've done several things during the last 3 years to make the project less an impact. We're building, right now we've started work on a gate here, realigning the gate here to make this area safer, so that left turns into the plant won't be as hazardous as they've been. We put a no right turn sign, actually it's right here on Roxbury, to keep truck traffic from going down Roxbury when they're not supposed to. We put speed indicator signs here on Moore Avenue to slow truck traffic down in response to neighborhood concerns. And we've been doing quite a few improvements right around the Granada Gate to make the flow of traffic in and out of that gate less of an impact to the neighborhood. One thing early on in the project, the neighbors were really concerned initially. You can imagine the first few months we were working on the project, we had days where we had up to 120 new truck traffic trips in and out of the plant, and people living along Moore Avenue were highly impacted by the project. But we kept saying it's not going to last forever. It's not going to last forever. We had some really big excavations that occurred in this time period, and then in this time period we had some sustained large excavations. But in general, the intense traffic has been limited to pretty short durations. One of the things that we're doing to, another impact that we have is that the plant is on a 43-acre site of pretty much, other than the intense industrial work that we do at the treatment plant, everything else is pretty the original. It's like the way it was 100 years ago. And we've been caretakers for a species of oak tree here on the plant that doesn't exist in many places in California. They're called blue oaks. And so we've been actually every tree on the site, on 43 acres, there's hundreds of trees. Every tree has a number and a tag, and we know the species and the size of the tree. So when we have to take out a tree to build something, we mitigate that loss. And one of the things we're doing is we're going to be planting about 500 trees in this area of the plant as a mitigation for the trees that we've taken out. And the mitigation isn't that we took 500 trees out, so we're going to plant 500. The mitigation is a ratio. You take out one tree, one particular kind of tree, you put 3 back. And so we'll be doing that work this next fall.
3 of the
Excuse me,
same
Mike,
kind of tree?
Oh, yes, Paul.
Just one, earlier on in the project, it was mentioned to us as neighbors that you're going to take out a lot of trees that abutted the project, that were your fence next to ours, so to speak.
Right.
And I was very pleased that you withdrew that. You didn't do it. So hopefully when you're coming to the wrap-up stages of the project, those commitments to not remove a lot of those trees remain. And that what doesn't happen is someone, like, most of us don't need a fence, and most of us don't need to get all the trees taken out.
Right. So the initial objective that caused us to think that we wanted to take those trees out was to build a road around the inside perimeter, so that for security reasons that we could have a motorized patrol. And we looked at that closely, and we found ways that we can get a perimeter road without going right up against the fence in some places. So in those areas, we cut back on the tree removal.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I think this is kind of a comic relief for the work we do. On our 43 acres, there's hundreds of wood rats, and they're a species of wood rat called the San Francisco dusky-footed wood rat, and they're not a protected species, but they're a species of interest, I think is kind of how they're described. So we have a crew that goes out in the night and picks up the wood rat nest and moves it so that we can build something where the wood rats were living before.
Wow.
And did I get that right, Steve? Did I say?
Yeah.
You were looking at me.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. So this is what a wood rat nest looks like, and that's what a wood rat looks like. In case you've probably seen a few if you live close to the plant. This is one of their nests, and so it's pretty. I think it's pretty crazy that when we know we're going to be taking out something in that area, we come in the middle of the night, we pick up all the nest, and we move it. And then the wood rats come back, where's my nest? And they start looking for it, and they find it, and they move to their new nest.
Wow. How do they find their new nest?
They just
You
go
got a
looking.
Rat
Put
radar.
little arrow signs. You're home this way.
It's not a trivial issue in a sense, because each one of those little green dots is a wood rat nest.
Oh my goodness.
And so they've all been mapped, and so we know when we're going to impinge on a wood rat nest, we plan ahead, and we call the crew in, and they put on their bunny suits and come out at night and move it. And the other thing we watch for, and on the plant, 2 or 3 times a week, we have, Rich, do you know how often H.D. Harvey's on the plant doing bird surveys?
Once a week.
Okay. They walk around the plant, biologists looking for nests, because we were obligated not to disturb nests of birds that are nesting. That doesn't make sense. We don't. If a nest is occupied and if a bird is laying eggs in a nest, we can't work there. So we look ahead to see where the birds are building their nests and try to chase them away so they don't continue with their nesting activity. This is the most recent problems we've been having in this area are with hummingbird nests, and this is an example of a hummingbird nest.
How much of a project delay has all this cost?
So far, we have had no delays. I don't
No
think.
delay, because there's a 50-foot buffer zones that we're allowed to not be within that category, so they try to move it or reallocate it away from the construction areas.
We, off of the environmental impacts now for a few minutes. One thing that you might like to know is that the Santa Clara Fire District has a big interest in our project because they regulate hazardous materials. So all of our work is regulated by the fire district. And so this is Lindsay, our inspector. She's on the plant probably at least once a week right now. And she's inspecting, in this case, to make sure that this pipe that's in here, this is the double contained pipe for moving chemicals around the plant. It is sloped so that if there's a leak inside the pipe, it will drain to a low spot and then be, it triggers an alarm and then we can address it. And so she keeps a little level in her pocket and she puts the level on the pipe, and if it's got the right slope to the drain, then it passes, and if not, the contractor has to redo it. One thing we always try to bring up in these meetings is what's going on in the neighborhood that, besides our project, that may have some impact on you. And we've been watching the Quito Bridge project for the last 3 or 4 years. When we first started the project in 2015, we thought they were going to start construction the next year in 2016. And each year they've been delayed. Their funding comes through Caltrans, I believe, and there's probably a lot of concerns about on Quito Road. There's 2 or 3 bridges that will be replaced with their project. So right now what they're saying is next summer. One of the things that we've been having troubles with our contractor is some of the concrete work that we've constructed has not met our high standards, and the contractor has gone back now to repair places that we determined through scanning that the rebar did not have, and the walls did not have sufficient cover. Bugs are.
Yeah, right.
So we're going to look at a few of the highlights of the construction now. This is the ozone contactor on the left, and this is our flash mixer that where the water that's leaving the ozone contactor comes through this pipe, and we inject alum and other chemicals into it to expedite the flocculation sedimentation process. These are our flocculators here, and these are sedimentation basins. And I promised that we were going to get a little more technical tonight, so I have this video that I want to show you. It's less than 2 minutes long, but I think a lot of times when we're talking about these kind of features, we don't. I don't think we do
The basin size to be
a very good
80%
job
smaller.
of showing you
The
what
footprint
they
is
do.
significantly smaller, which reduces costs while increasing capacity.
These
And
are our
operation
plate
consumes
settlers.
zero energy,
And
providing additional
this
cost
plant will be
savings.
the only plant with
The
plate
system's
settlers.
advanced flow management enables superior efficiency and effluent quality. Flow management begins when untreated water enters the sedimentation basin. The influent immediately passes through MRI's patented helical flow diffuser, which splits the flow and creates a rotating motion. This slows the velocity of the influent by 75% and protects the flock structure. The flow then enters the feed zones, slowly migrates downward, and enters the plates through the side inlet ports. Inside the plate settler module, the flow is distributed evenly and at a constant velocity as it travels across and up each plate's entire surface. The result is an ideal settling environment allows settled solids to migrate down the plates into the quiet zone. As the sludge settles, clean water travels upward and exits the plate module by flowing up over the top tubes and into the effluent orifices. These components make up MRI's patented flow control deck and enable the system's even flow distribution. The effluent orifices create a consistent draw along the top tubes. This establishes a constant rate of flow and an absolutely even distribution across the entire width of each plate at any flow rate. The result is a shallow 1-inch depth of clean water, which maintains a uniform flow as it enters the effluent orifices and travels through the top tubes. As you can see, the consistent
Okay, the rest is kind of a commercial for this company that we're buying their equipment, but, let's see if I can get back to the PowerPoint. There it is. Okay, so, let's see, go to slideshow. Is that right on the current slide?
You got it.
Okay, so these are the plate settlers that we just saw in the video. And the very first seconds of the video describe the reason that we're using plate settlers is because we get the same amount of sedimentation, flocculation in these basins here and sedimentation in these basins for 100 million gallons a day of production as we get from the 4 existing clarifiers that are on the plant, which take up a lot more space. In fact, as was mentioned in the beginning of that video, the the plate settlers allow us to get the same production in about 25% of the surface area as we would with the kind of plant, the kind of flocculation sedimentation that was built in 1968. One of the things that we did early on in design was look at the aesthetics of the project from the neighbor's point of view. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to have a face of the plant along Moore Avenue look nice, and so this is the architectural features that we settled on in design, and the contractor just in the last couple of weeks has started work on constructing that down at what we call the lower Moore Avenue gate. So I have a couple of pictures just of the other construction that's going on. This is the raw water control facility. The raw water enters the plant, as Aaron mentioned, from our source water that comes up from down on Wedgwood down by what we call the Vasona pump station. It comes in a 72-inch, and it splits here into 2 and then goes into the ozone contactor. Right now the water is goes down and into the old flocculations, the old clarifiers. So we've had a very safe project so far, 1,000 days with no lost time accidents, and that's an amazing record for the kind of serious and dangerous work that we have. About somewhere around 80 people every day on the site working, and so you know, from time to time there's little mishaps. Somebody scrapes their elbow or has a problem, but they don't lose a day of work. And so we have not had a lost day accident. We had this tipsy dump truck problem a couple of weeks ago, but the worker in the truck wasn't injured. So a little bit about the nitty-gritty. We don't often get into this, but I thought it might be interesting to you how much these kind of things cost and where we are with the cost on the project. The contractor that bid and was awarded the project, Balfour Beatty Infrastructure, was one of 5 bidders on the project. 7 bidders were pre-qualified to bid on the project, 2 declined to bid. But the bids, we opened back in May of 2015, and Balfour Beatty was awarded based on their low bid. The high bid at the time was by a contractor, Kiewit Construction, and they were about $25 million higher than this bid. So far we've made about $7.8 million in change orders on the project, and if any of you have done a remodel of your house, you know what change orders are all about. When you're retrofitting an old plant like this, there's a lot of unforeseen conditions. Even though we spent a lot of work in design, we can't possibly anticipate everything that's needed to build a project like this. So from time to time we make changes to make the project better, to make our operations and maintenance people better off. One of the things we track as a project management team is how are we doing against as a percentage. And so generally we think 10% or less is a good number to fall into for a project. So right now we're at less than 5%. We do have pending change orders that we're still negotiating with the contractor. And so far, we've completed 56% of the work, and we track that on our monthly pay applications that the contractor makes. And but the big problem is that 69% of the project time has elapsed. So we would like this number to be the same as these two numbers, and it's not. We've been delayed. So if you look at the schedules, the baseline schedule was to complete the first phase of the work. There's 5 phases. The first phase was essentially to mobilize the contractor to the site and get things started. That went pretty smoothly. We finished that right on schedule. But the next phase, the phase we're in right now, was scheduled to be completed in December of 2016, and we're still working on it. And this is June 2019. So our planned completion now for phase 2 is later this year or early next year. And that will be the trigger that we can start phase 3, which is the demolition of the 4 clarifiers that will provide us with the space to build the remainder of the project. So right now we're into that part of the phase 2 work where we are.
Excuse me, Mike, should we have confidence that since phase 2 was so delayed that phase 3 can be done in the allotted time frame?
Well, phase 3 is a much simpler and it's really, we're only expecting it'll take 5 months to do phase 3. It's phase 4 that's the...
Right, then the phase 4?
Yeah. We're working right now with the contractor to develop ways to regain schedule control and get the contractor to be more efficient about getting the project done on schedule. It's something that we spend a lot of time working on, but it would be unrealistic for me to predict the outcome of that.
This that shows you will finish in 2023. Is that your present optimistic goal, or is that?
We try to be realistic in that the original schedule was to complete in 2020, so that shows the 3-year delay. And right now we're 2 years delayed in phase 2. So there are opportunities, and we're working with the contractor to find ways to more efficiently build phases 3, 4, and 5, and including extended work hours and some ways of making things go faster. But it's in a lot of ways, it's the biggest problem we have on the project is the schedule. The work's getting done, but it's just going much slower than we anticipated.
Thank you.
So right now, we're bringing all the work that we've done the last 3 years together. And a lot of the ways that things come together is through the control systems that modulate the power and the chemical systems and the plant water. So just like in the streets around Los Gatos, there's water mains in the street. We have our own water mains here at the plant that carry water to different facilities where they need what we call carriage water. So we're finishing that right now, and we're also getting the chemical metering system set up. But the really big problems that we're dealing with right now are getting all of the control systems to work together and to make it so that the plant operates safely and efficiently. So that's about all I have to say tonight. Tony's here. He's our liaison. He's been on the project as long as I have, and he'll continue on the project. And like it's been mentioned earlier in the meeting, he's our go-to guy for questions and comments that you might have, but mostly questions, and we get a lot of questions. Neighbors call and ask, well, why is this happening, or when's this going to be finished, about particular activities that are going on. So Tony, when he gets those calls, he lets our project team know that he's got a question. We go to Roger and Rich. They're in touch with the contractor, and we get responses back to you as quickly as we can. We have a blog, and we're having a little trouble with our blog right now, but we expect that we'll have it back up and running within the next week or two. We had an organizational change with one of our sub-consultants, and we're doing the blog work more in-house than we were doing it before, and we're trying to get it back on track. We've had 18 of these neighborhood meetings, and although there's not many people here, the people that really care and concerned about the project show up at these meetings, and I think it's a good way to communicate with the neighbors and make ourselves open for questions and to discuss the work we're doing. And sometimes we use Nextdoor now when we have any of you are use the Nextdoor application for little neighborhood news items. If we have short notice on, for instance, a contractor needs to move a big piece of equipment, we're going to have to close Moore Avenue for an hour or two to move the equipment up from Pollard, then we put something out on Nextdoor so people get a notice. And then a lot of times we use door hangers and letters to people when we can to keep you informed. And so I think it might have cooled off a little bit, so we could take a tour. Did I leave anybody out of asking a question that they might have wanted? Yes?
I'd like you to elaborate a little more on the schedule and the reasons for the slippage of the schedule. Because it's, last I remember, I think you said it was supposed to be 2020. And I got this in the mail the other day, and it said 2023, and needless to say, I was kind of shocked.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you would be shocked. We wanted to get this project built in 5 years and give you back your neighborhood, and it's not going very well with our contractor. We have we've made some small changes in the project.
Belfort baby?
Yes. In some ways, it's a highly litigious situation right now with the contractor, and we have recourse to certain procedures in the law to address what are concerns with the contractor, and our executive management is meeting with the executive management of the contractor to work this out. One of the only hammers that we have in a situation like this is called liquidated damages. There were schedules that had deadlines, and the Phase 2 deadline was in December of 2016. And when the contractor missed that, we started assessing liquidated damages. And the liquidated damages right now amount to about $4 or $5 million. And they continue to accrue month by month until Phase 2 is finished. So that's the gun we hold at the contractor's head to get the work done, and that's in addition to the backroom negotiations that are going on with our executive management. I know it's an unfortunate and difficult situation for the neighbors, and I try not to sugarcoat it and give unrealistic expectations, and so that's why the 2023 date is in there, and that's a 3-year delay on a 5-year project, which is a serious problem.
Do you think in hindsight, he underbid the project?
Well,
And what you're having is he's got other projects he's devoting staff to, as opposed to your project, and therefore ours just gets delayed?
Well, and it's a frustrating thing about our position is that in some ways, it's a black box what's going on in the contractor's office. We don't have a fly on the wall in there reporting to us on what their objectives are and what their tactics are. We just see the outcome of the delays. We had planned, for instance, parking, and a lot of the planning we did before the project started was we figured that the contractor would bring about 125 people a day to work on the project. And so far, the peak days have been about 90. So, for whatever reason, in some of that you just mentioned, they haven't staffed it at the same level that we expected that they would.
Yeah, I hope you can get them to stick to their original, staffing
Yeah.
goals.
Aaron, do you want to address that?
Just kind of reiterate what Mike was saying, and that is Valley Water Management and the board are aware of the issues that are going on here and some of the schedule delays. And we are committed to continue this project and take it to fruition. There are some road bumps that we're going through, and some of the details are still being worked out in figuring out some of those things due to the possible litigious nature of some of these things. But we really are committed to make this work. We do understand some of these roadblocks or some of these bumps that we have to go through to get through, but I think we've identified a lot of the issues that allowed us to get to where we are now, and we are working feverishly to try to address those issues and continue to move forward. And in the meantime, we greatly appreciate your patience and your understanding while we move through this situation.
But the project consultant, do you have any comments on why this has been delayed 3 years?
I'm going to defer to the district on that.
Is this part of the problem?
No, I don't think so. I think Roger and his team are doing a great job. They have a lot of work. There's every day there's multiple activities going on the project, and I think one of the slides I showed earlier in the presentation about the concrete problems, that was a problem that's taken the contractor longer to address, and that's clearly on them. When they do faulty construction, then it's on them to fix it. And I think they're trying to fix it as best they can, but they're not increasing their workforce commensurate with the repair work as well as the pushing the project forward. And the same contractor has been successfully awarded 4 or 5 really big projects in Northern California in the last few years. And so your other point about that they have limitations on their resources, and sometimes they're diverting people from our project to other projects that may be more profitable or have more.
And we are aware, and some of those things that executive management are trying to, is that's one of the larger issues that they are trying to address and get commitments from the contractor to make sure that we can get this thing moving, and hopefully reestablish a good working relationship and reestablish a commitment from them beyond the contractual one they already made to complete the project. And it's Mike's been doing his hardest to kind of keep these things moving and keep those things moving. It just happened to be some circumstances that were there, but we do believe we know what these circumstances are and are working to address them as fast as we can.
Well, thank you for your efforts. We certainly hope you can expedite this.
There are complex issues that many parties are involved, even the board is involved at this point. We don't have answers to your question, but then I appreciate staff's transparency that they didn't want to give you still the old schedule and they're not ready.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
At least I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, but to answer many questions, we're working on it.
And perhaps by the next quarterly meeting, there'll be some resolution. There's some pretty intense meetings going on week by week right now with the contractor to try to solve this problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's no other questions, then we'll let Steve take us out to the filter deck and we'll take a peek at the
Do a tour and see what we're doing.